Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech, Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Bochem Leshalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Baruchuni Leshalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Try it with me. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shuvchem Leshalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Barbara, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Good to be with you. Good to be welcoming Shabbat with you and with all of you that are with us, whether you're joining us by live stream or on Facebook Live, and also those of this weekend's B'nai Mitzvah and their families who are here with us in the sanctuary this evening to welcome Shabbat, to offer prayers and song, and to share a little bit of learning this evening. We're so glad that you're joining us wherever you are. If you're at home and you're watching us on the Temple's live stream page or on our Facebook Live, I want to invite you to take just a second now and find the chat box on your screen and just let us know that you're here, that you're joining us. It feels really good for us to know that you're here. It's also a wonderful reminder for our B'nai Mitzvah and their family to know who's joining us from out of town, out of state, and out of the building, so that we know that we are surrounded by friends and relatives and people offering love and good wishes from all over the place. So when you found that chat box on your page, the other thing that I want to invite you to think about is a question that we'll be exploring this week. I want to give you a few minutes to think about your answer to this question. Our question for this week is, for whom are you responsible? For whom are you responsible? You want to take a second and think about what your answer to that question might be and type that into the chat box as well. We'll be exploring that question a little bit later. For whom are you responsible? Now that you've made yourself at home on your screen, again, wherever you are, you'll be able to see the words of our prayers put up on the screen so you can follow along with our service. I'll also be announcing the pages in our books for those who are worshiping with us here in the Bear Sanctuary this evening. And so now to begin our service, as we do each Shabbat, we'll begin with the lighting of the Shabbat candles. So it's my pleasure to invite up this weekend's B'nai Mitzvah to assist with that. I want to invite up Spencer Arudi and Morgan Reisner and Lindsay Kronowitz with their parents to come find a space here up on the bima to lead us in the meditations and the lighting of the Shabbat candles. If you're following along in a prayer book, we'll begin with meditations on page 2 and 9. And the blessing is also on pages 2 and 3 of those prayer books, but we begin with these meditations before the lighting of the Shabbat candles.
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we, by our lives, give light to all who behold us.
As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we in our own day be among those who kindle light. Randy?
That's Randy.
She doesn't know. She doesn't have one. Yeah, go. I'm trying to figure this out. Don't hit me again.
O source of light and truth, creator of the eternal law of goodness, help us to find knowledge by which to live. Lead us to take the words we shall speak into our hearts and our lives.
Bless all who enter the sanctuary in need, all who bring the offerings of their hearts. May our worship lead us to acts of kindness, peace, and love.
We offer thanks, O God, for this Shabbat, which unites us in faith and hope.
For Shabbat holiness, we inspire sacred living. For Shabbat memories, glowing even in darkness. For Shabbat peace, born of friendship and love. We offer thanks and blessing, O God.
Let's sing.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Amen. As our families make their way back to their seats now, we're going to continue with the Lecha Dodi hymn. If you're following along in a prayer book, this is on page 20 of your books. This hymn offers a poetic greeting that we offer to the Shabbat bride, which we welcome with eagerness and joy as the sun sets and Shabbat approaches.
Lecha Dodi likrat halah b'nei Shabbat nikabela. Lecha Dodi likrat halah b'nei Shabbat nikabela. Shamor v'zachor B'nei Shabbat Kabbalat, verse 5. Hitoreri, Kiva Orech Kumi Ori, Uri Shida Beri, Kavod Adonai Alayich Nikla, Lecha Dodi Nikrat Kala, B'nei Shabbat Nikabela, Lecha Dodi Nikrat Kala, B'nei Shabbat Nikabela.
For verse 9, we rise and face the opening of the door to welcome the Shabbat bride.
Boi v'shalom hateret bala, gam b'simcha uv'tzola, toch emunei am segula, boi chala, lecha dodi nikrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nikabela, lecha dodi nikrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nikabela.
We have welcomed Shabbat. She is here. I hope you can feel her in your space or wherever you are. And so now we remain standing, continuing to the call for worship, which is on your books, in your books on page 28.
La 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 la, ya la 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 la, la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Barechu et Adonai HaMevorach, Baruch Adonai HaMevorach, HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed, HaMevorach, HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed.
It is my pleasure to invite Lindsay to the bima now to lead her congregation as we offer this prayer for the coming of evening. This is on page 31 of your books.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim, b'chokhmah poteach sherim, u'tvuna meshaneh itim, u'mchalif et chazmanim, u'msader et hakochavim, b'mishmerotechem barakia kirtzono, borei yom v'layla, golel or mipnei hoshech, v'hoshech mipnei or. Uma'avir yom, u'mevi laila, um'avdil ben yom u'ben laila, Adonai tziva'o shemo, El chai v'kayam, tamidim lo chaleinu le'olam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai, hama'ariv aravim.
Amen.
Open up our eyes, teach us how to live, fill our hearts with joy and all the love you have to give. us in peace as you lead us to your name, and we will know that you are one. Open up our eyes, teach us how to live, fill our hearts with joy and all the love you have to give. Gather us in peace as you lead us to your name. We will know that you are one, and we will know that you are one. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Vaed.
You may be seated. Lindsay, thank you. It is a pleasure for me to invite Morgan to the Bima now to lead her congregation in Ve'ahavta. You can find this on page 36 of your prayer books.
Ve'ahavta Adonai Elohecha v'chol lavavcha uv'chol nafshecha v'chol meodecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'elech asher anochi metzavecha hayom alevavecha v'shivnatam levanecha v'dibartam bam v'shivtecha bevetecha uvleftecha v'derech ushokbecha uvkumecha ukshartam leo al yadecha v'chayu latotafot beineinecha uktavtam al mezuzot beitecha uvisharecha Leman tiskeru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'yitem kiddushim le'Elohechem. Ani Adonai Elohechem. Asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem le'Elohim. Ani Adonai Elohechem.
Beautiful. On page 39 of our books, standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there's no way to get from here to there except by joining hands, marching together.
Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot, oh sefele, nora tehilot, oh sefele. Who is like you? Adonai, who is like you? Adonai, ya la la la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la la la, ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la.
I hope that you've had a few moments to think about our question for this week, for whom are you responsible? Maybe you've taken a moment to type your answer or your perspective on that question into the chat box on our streaming page on the Emanu website or on our Facebook Live video to let us know how you think your responsibility to look after others manifests itself. This week we read in the Torah about the creation of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and immediately after they're created, God charges them with their obligation toward the world that they will receive. God tells them they were made le'ovdo u'leshomro, to tend it and to guard it. From the very beginning of humanity's creation, we were charged with the obligation to tend and to protect. And that obligation remains for us to look after our world, for us to look after our families, for us to look after our community and those who need us dearly. And so with that obligation, that charge, and that moral compass instilled firmly within us, we enter this Shabbat and enter the days ahead of care and obligation, of protection and stewardship. We'll continue with Vishamru. This is on page 44 of your prayer books or on your screen.
Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat la'asot et HaShabbat ledorotam berit olam. Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat la'asot et HaShabbat ledorotam berit olam. Beini uvein b'nei Yisrael oti leolam. Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat la'asot et HaShabbat ledorotam berit olam. Ki sheishet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat la'asot et HaShabbat ledorotam berit olam. Uvayom hashvi'i Shabbat vayinafash. Shabbat vayinafash. Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat la'asot et HaShabbat ledorotam berit olam. Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat la'asot et HaShabbat ledorotam berit olam. La'asot et HaShabbat ledorotam berit olam.
We have arrived now at the Amidah, at the central section of our worship service, and so it is my pleasure to invite Spencer to the bima to lead us in worship. We'll begin on page 46 of our prayer books or on your screen as we rise for the beginning of the Amidah.
Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi agita hilateha. Adonai, open on my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu ve'imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzhak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor ve'hanara, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, Ve'konei Hakol, Ve'zocher Hasdeavot ve'imavot, U'mevigilar lifnei v'neihem, Iman Shemo be'achava, Melech Ozer Moshiach U'magin, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham v'Ezrat Sarah. Atah gibor leolam Adonai, Mechayeh hakol atah rav leoshia. Mashiva ruach u'merid hagashem, Mehakel hayim bechesed. Mehayeh hakol berachamim rabim, Somech noflim v'rofeh holim, Umatir asurim, Umekayem emunato lishenei afar, Michamoha bal givirot, Umidom melach, Melach mimi, Umechayem, Umat miach Yeshua. V'nemon atah le'achayot hakol, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayeh hakol. Atah kadosh u'shmicha kadosh, u'kdoshim b'chol yom yechalelu hasela. Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el hakadosh.
You may be seated. Thank you, Spencer. We'll continue in our books on page 57. You are with us in our prayer, our love and our doubt, in our longing to feel your presence and do your will. You are the still, clear voice within us. Therefore, O God, when doubt troubles us, when anxiety makes us tremble, when pain clouds the mind, we look inward for the answer to our prayers. There may we find you, and there find courage, insight, and endurance. And let our worship bring us closer to one another, that all Israel and all who seek you may find new strength for your service. Baruch atah Adonai, she'odcha levadcha b'yira na'avod. We'll continue with our prayer for peace. Our prayer for peace, Shalom Rav, is on page 60 of our prayer books.
Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki ata hu melech adon lechol hashalom. Atahu melech adon lechol hashalom. Shalom rav al Yisrael amcha sim leolam. Shalom rav al Yisrael amcha tasim leolam. V'tov be'einecha levarech et amcha Yisrael bechol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha tasim leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha tasim leolam. Tasim leolam. Tasim leolam. We take just a few moments for silent prayer. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ואמרו אמן.
We take a moment now to offer a prayer of healing. Mishaberach is found on page 253 of our books. Before we sing this prayer, though, we take just a moment to turn our thoughts to the members of our community, of our congregational community, and the wider community who are in need of healing on this Shabbat. Tonight, we're offering this Mishaberach on behalf of David Askenaz, Robin Beckwith, Marcia Block, Bradley Borden, Melba Berman, Jennifer Carey, Sammy Cherry, Michelle Cohen, Miles Cohn, David Kottner, Richard Dana, Georgianne Goldenberg, Neil Goldenberg, Ann Graubart, Jerry Hooks, Richard Jackson, Sarah James, Adam Kaplan, Lawrence Levy, Rachel McBride, Zach McGrath, Barbara Naples, Craig Sampsell, Paul Sarens, Edward Simmons, Dorley Skelton, Mervat Tadros, Angelica Taylor, Martha Chushida, Roger Williams, Shimon ben Esther, Chaim Lebesh Vevel ben Sheva, Gelka Nechama bat Lebachaya, and all who are suffering with physical illness, emotional distress and pain, and those battling COVID-19. They're all with us as we offer this prayer.
May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Misheberach imotenu mekor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
We also have an opportunity this Shabbat to offer a blessing of a more joyful sort. Barbara Black Levine is celebrating her 80th birthday, just celebrated a few days ago, and so we have the opportunity to wish her well and offer her a mazel tov and our warmest blessings on having reached this milestone occasion. Barbara, the Torah portion this week, as I said earlier, talks about the creation of Adam and Eve in the garden. And right after God creates Adam, God thinks and reflects and concludes, Lo tov heyot ha'adam levado. It's not good for a person to be alone. So, in contrast, I suppose we can conclude that it is good for a person to be surrounded by others, to find themselves in the midst of a community of people who love and support and care about them deeply. And so I think by that measure, you indeed have built a life that is very good, having built a life surrounded by all of those who love and adore you so much. All of the people who surround you, your 3 children, your 10 grandchildren, your loving relationship with Irv, and a warm, supportive circle of friends who are always with you, all of them and all of us love and cherish you very much. You are a dear part of your family, a very beloved part of this community, and a very valuable member of the Jewish community at large. All of us are privileged to celebrate, even remotely with you, this great milestone of having reached your 80th birthday. And so we give our thanks to God for the opportunity to celebrate this joyous occasion with you. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shehecheyanu v'kiyamanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, for giving us life and sustaining us and bringing us to this very joyful day. Mazel tov, Barbara. Happy birthday. We're so happy that you are with us remotely to celebrate this big day with the people who love you. I have a few short announcements, a couple of logistical notes for this weekend. As a reminder, tomorrow's chapel service will begin at 10:30, and you'll access that service by going to the Proler Chapel streaming tab on our website and on the Facebook Live page. For those of you who are going to be remotely joining the Reisners and Arudis for the B'nai Mitzvah at 10:30 or the Kronowitzes for the Bat Mitzvah at 3, you will want to click over to the Barish Sanctuary streaming tab on our website. Again, you'll be going to the tab that says the Barish Sanctuary on the Emmanuel website. I want to remind you again about Emmanuel Votes, which is our nonpartisan campaign to achieve 100% voter turnout amongst our congregants in this year's election. We are really trying to get everybody in this congregation to cast a vote this year. I did mine today. You can see my little I voted sticker. The EE Votes team wants to remind you that early voting is underway. The last day to apply for a ballot by mail is getting very close, and a reminder that your request has to have been received by the clerk's office, not just postmarked, by Friday, October 23rd. So if you're going to be voting by mail, your request has to be into their office by the 23rd of October. For all the details, you can go to our website and click on the EE Votes tab or go to emmanuelhouston.org/EE-Votes. I want to invite you to join us for another exciting game of online trivia this Sunday, October 18th at 7. Pre-registration is a must. We hope that you will join us. Lastly, a reminder about our Racial Justice Book Club that will begin on Thursday, October 22nd at 7:30 p.m. as we explore the book How to Be an Anti-Racist with Ibram Kendi and facilitated by Rabbi Fixler. The first session will focus on the introduction of the book through chapter 10. Again, we'll ask that you register in advance so we know to expect you. So as I said at the beginning of our service together, today is Shabbat Breshit. This is the Shabbat on which we begin our annual retelling of the Torah story and start over from the beginning, in the beginning. So the stories that we read on this Shabbat are full of firsts. The first day of the universe's existence, the first Shabbat, the first animals and people, and just 4 chapters into the Torah, the first act of violence, when Cain kills his brother Abel. Shortly after that, the Torah records another first, the first question ever asked by human beings: am I my brother's keeper? Now, as readers of the texts, we immediately recognize that Cain is the bad guy of the story. We see him immediately as a tragic antagonist because, as obvious as the answer to his question seems to us, yes, of course we're our brother's keepers, of course we're responsible for each other. Apparently, Cain asked the question because to him it was equally as evident that the answer was no. No, we're not our brother's keepers. We are on our own. We have to look out for ourselves because in this world, our options are either kill or be killed. Every year when this Parsha rolls around again, we're reminded to draw strength from the bonds that connects all humans to each other. All of us are the children of Adam and Eve, all descended from a common ancestor, all united by our ancient predecessors and by the divine image in which we were made. But in honesty and candor, we are also all the relatives of Cain, all distant grand nephews and nieces of history's first murderer. It's painful to be reminded that resentment and violence are woven into our DNA just as securely as our capacity for love and compassion. Although, to be fair, we haven't needed all that much reminding recently. You don't need to have looked very far at all to recognize the human propensity for tribalism and violence, We have received so much difficult news and come to recognize how much hard work still lies ahead of us to build a world of unity and peace. So tonight I want to share a very small story that I hope will offer a similarly small note of encouragement and hope. I got a call last weekend from a friend, a community activist with whom I've worked on causes of racial justice here in Houston. And he was inviting me to speak at a press conference put on by the NAACP in recognition of George Floyd's birthday, which fell this week. I appreciated the call, and I was grateful that he thought I might have something meaningful to contribute, but I'll confess in honesty and candor again that I didn't really want to do it. Events like that, press events, are generally not my favorite things to do. As supportive as I've been of this work over the past months, things like this often feel performative and self-gratifying and not terribly productive. Not to mention, again, in candor and honesty, the fact that Monday, the day scheduled for the press conference, happened to be what would have been my first day off in a really long time. But I said yes, and I want to tell you why I said yes. I said yes because the real underlying motive for the press conference was to celebrate a legislative accomplishment. That two local municipalities, the city of Pearland and the city of West Columbia, had announced their endorsement of a new initiative for criminal justice reform that had been assembled and championed by the NAACP. The plan had been painstakingly hammered out over several months via Zoom, mind you, of collaboration and cooperation between government agencies and law enforcement and private citizens, all working together in the kind of partnership that is very rare indeed, toward a concrete and actionable plan for a more equitable administration of policing and justice. And in the end, those two cities ratified that initiative, which laid out specific steps both in the short and long term for renewed modes of community engagement, police recruitment and training, discipline and management for law enforcement officers, grand jury and trial initiatives, and local legislative steps. So I accepted my friend's invitation and I went because I wanted to visibly support a wonderful model of democratic partnership and self-reflection like this, and because I generally want to feed what I see as an appetite for change toward greater equity in our public life. But the biggest reason that I said yes was because I wanted to keep a commitment, and it's a commitment that I made to you, to our congregational family, back in May, in the message that I shared shortly after George Floyd died. In that message, I told you that I had already grown impatient with symbolic messaging, that I'd grown impatient with what has by now become a worn-out cycle of well-meaning community leaders offering reassuring words, but no concrete action to follow them up. If we believe that living a Jewish life means upholding a commitment to justice and ethical living, and I do, by the way, think that's what Jewish life means, then yes, when we see injustice, we need to talk. We need to speak up and say no, to show up and call out and confront and condemn. And we've seen plenty of that over the past few months, lots of activism and sign waving and demonstrations. But I hope that we will also remember that having an ethical conscience also means that it is similarly our job to show up in support and solidarity when we see things going right, to affirm with our presence and our voices, saying, yes, this is what justice can look like. And this initiative that was approved in Pearland and West Columbia is an example of something being done right, and I wanted to be there to celebrate it. So I accepted the invitation, I went to the press conference, and the gathering was held in a small plaza in front of the building which houses the Pearland Police Department. If you're not familiar with it, the building stands directly, immediately across the street from Houston Memorial Gardens, which is the cemetery where George Floyd is buried. in a grave where the grass has not yet grown. We gathered there, the chief of police and his officers, city council members and other elected officials, community activists and clergy and the members of the Floyd family, standing there on that open plaza with the courthouse and council chambers and the police department behind us and the fresh turf of that grave before us, affirming and declaring publicly that we want to do better, but that we want to do it together. That was one of the most powerful and articulate answers to Cain's question in the Torah. Because we are each other's keepers, because we are rooted together in the most primal points of our souls, which results in inalienable obligations that we have one to the other. This was a real accomplishment for those legislators and law enforcement officers and activists. Police reform, community partnership, and cooperation. It is a small victory. I don't want to overlook that. The cities of Pearland and West Columbia together comprise less than 150,000 people. But when we assume an ethical obligation toward the other, even the smallest step toward justice is significant and indispensable. We all, I hope, remember Dr. King's quote about the arc of the moral universe. Accomplishments like this one will help curve its angle very, very slightly, imperceptibly, bending it toward justice, toward a heightened appreciation of the full humanity and dignity of our fellow citizens and of the vulnerable segments of our communities. And I was so glad I was there. Our tradition as Americans, our civic tradition, holds that in any city in our nation, to be morally and legally sustainable, it has to preserve at its core a commitment to equality and fairness. And those who lead our communities, especially but not only those who oversee law and justice, must be sure to take scrupulous care to grant all people equal justice under the law. That's our commitment as Americans. But it is paired with a spiritual commitment we have as Jews from our scriptural tradition, our heritage of Torah, that reminds us that we are bound together, all of us, forever, because we are united by our common descent from the Garden of Eden. We should be reminded permanently about our obligations and our imperatives to take care of each other. Cain's question, the first one uttered in the words of the Torah, arises in every generation. Am I my brother's keeper? There is, I hope we know, only one right answer to that question, though there are many different ways we can make that answer live, all of them that are sustainable and reliable and long-lasting, involve working slowly, patiently, deliberately together, arm in arm, toward equity and justice, toward liberty for all. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We'll continue now in our books at the bottom half of page 282. Those of you that are with us, I'll invite to rise as the ark is opened for Aleinu.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך
You may be seated. At this time, as at all times at this point in our service, we take just a moment for the sacred work of memory as our thoughts turn to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. We take just a moment now to do the work of memory. We think of our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who died at this season in years past, and those whom we have drawn into our hearts with our own. On this Shabbat, our hearts go out in sympathy to the family of Alan Lewis Leon, who is laid to rest just this week. To his name we add these, the names of those whose yahrzeits fall this week. Together we remember Ann Pleason Abramson, Irving Meyer Axelrod, Rose Axelrod, Arthur Clark Baker, Joseph Barish, Charles Berman, Mark Bodson, Lenny Braginski, Richard Bronstein, Martha Jacobson Clark, Max J. Cohen, Rosalind Lewenstein Colby, Blanche Davidson, Donald Paul Deegan, Harold Farb, Lillian Feinstein, Jan Feingold, Joan Marion Feingold, Harry Fradkin, Francis Frapart, Miriam Mary Levy Freed, Dorothy Friedman, Lillian L. Gates, Rudolph W. Gleisner, Edward Adolphus Ned Goddard, Maureen Lip Godereis, Leonore Goldblatt, Albert Lester Goldblatt, Harry Goldenberg, Alan Goldring, Morris Greenberg, Emma Grevsky, Joseph Gross, Harry Grover, Maurice J. Harwood, Daniel Hirsch, Anna Falk Hoffman, Alex Hoffman, Adine Holland, George Holland, John Horvath, Suzanne Kaufman Jacobs, Sadie Block Jacobs, Gussie Jacobson, Max Jaffe, Genevieve P. Jones, Doris Kahn, Benjamin Larry Carball, Francis Kramer, Irene Krams, Ruth Levin, William Davy Lawrenson, Selma Mantell, Dorothy Rolfe Martin, Sarah Mazer, Morris Miller, Elsie Nathan, Carol Orsek, Dot Perot, Helen Presser, Ruth Rappaport, Zelda Lee Keeper Rick, Ray L. Robbins, Rebecca Rosenberg, Solly Rosenthal, Rhoda Rubenstein, Edna Solomon Rudy, Thomas E. Samuels, Samuel Sazin, Betty Schaefer, Helma Shallett, Martin Morris Schwartz, Jack Schwartz, Elsie Corin Shelley, Esther Shinbaum, Albert Solomon, Tilly Reichek Sondak, Daniel Justin Stark, Irving Stecken, Jack S. Stevenson, Dorothy Stewart, Minnie Slavin Stone, Betty Sutton, Sarah Tizer, Sally Waldman, Ivy Westheimer Sr., Sylvan Wolfson, Corey Paul Ziegler, Seymour Ziff, and Ralph Zirkelbach. The memories of all of them are with us as we rise together for the recitation of Kaddish, which can be found on page 294 of our prayer books, page 294. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divra cherutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chay d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'izman kariv imru amen, yehe shmei Rabbah mevarach le'alam u'lalmei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei d'kudsha barichu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, Tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehe shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen.
Shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru, imru, amen.
We'll continue with the blessings of Kiddush and Motzi, led by our B'nai Mitzvah and their family. Spencer, Morgan, and Lindsay will lead us in the blessings of Kiddush and Motzi. With their parents. You guys ready? 1, 2, 3.
Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam,
Asher kishanu b'mitzvotav,
v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kosho, v'ahava uvratzon hilchilanu, zikaron lema'aseh bereshit, ki hu yom techila lemikrae kodesh, zecher litziat Mitzrayim, ki banu v'charta ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim v'shabbat kodshecha ve'ahava uvratzon inchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh hashabat. Amen. L'chaim, everybody. We'll continue with the blessing for Motzi, the blessing over the challah, giving thanks for the food that sustains our bodies. Whenever you guys are ready, that's good. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Thank you, families. Shabbat shalom. L'chaim and b'tei avon. Barbara, what are we going to close with tonight?
Shir Chadash, sing a new song to God. Shiru Adonai, Kol Haaretz. Shiru Adonai, Shir Chadash. Shiru Adonai, Kol Haaretz. Shiru Adonai, Shir Chadash. Sing unto God all the earth a new song. I will sing unto God a new song. Sing unto God and we'll all sing along. All the earth a new song unto God. Shiru Adonai, Kol Haaretz. Shiru Adonai, Shir Chadash.
O God, as we enter this Shabbat Breshit, this Shabbat of new beginnings, help us remember our connectedness to each other and our obligation to each other. that all of us are and always will be the keeper of our brothers and sisters. May this guide and inspire us on this day and forever. Amen. Shabbat shalom, everybody. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.